You are the person to talk about with financial markets and technology, and you started one of the first real estate transaction platforms. You've done billions of dollars of transactions. How do you build legitimacy?
Nothing compounds faster than trust. Be relationship oriented and focused and not transaction oriented. Not have your hand out every time you're looking for something from someone who could potentially be helpful to you. Put your hand out to offer something. Sometimes that means foregoing opportunities. If you're going to come off as transaction oriented and you're not really going to get to know the counterpart. It's nice to say you've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. The reality is that 95% of my conversations with prospective investors were, no. Thanks, but no thanks. If you're thinking about building a business, there's never a right time to do it. Never perfect alignment, but getting in the game and learning, you grow. Growth and comfort, they can't coexist. If you have an idea, if you see a niche or green shoot, you've got a unique insight because of where you're working, do the unconventional thing. Jump in the deep end, do it, and you will learn how to swim.
Ryan, thank you for coming in. We're super excited to have you on the podcast. I do want to jump right into it.
Yeah.
You are the person to talk about with financial markets and technology. You did start your career off at Goldman in a technology group. You worked at Blackstone in private equity, and you started one of the first real estate transaction platforms that kind of like digitized the entire space. So we want to know what the heck is going on in the current financial markets. People are talking about a SaaS apocalypse and an AI bubble at the same time. What are we potentially missing?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me and all the kind words. And, when there are these types of technological innovations and, disruptions or creations of value, people oftentimes look at one or two events and extrapolate and say, world's changing forever. And there's a lot of hyperbolic talk about things like SaaS apocalypse. Now, there's some merit to it because we are in the age of AI. But the way I look at it is there's a ton of valuable companies, SaaS companies, that have core utility that's only going to be enhanced by AI. And the companies in the SaaS world that will endure are the ones that are not just application layer. The ones that have built level of trust, entrenchment, workflow, uh, integrations, such that if they layer on AI on top of the compounded trust that they build, or that they built rather, that foundation can scale, allow them to grow, and allow them to offer even more value for customers. And so, to me, when I think about the SaaS world and the ecosystem, and you can't, generalize because every company is different. There's B2B, there's B2C, but at a high level, my view is that many of these companies are already starting to reinvent themselves. And reinvent themselves for the better. And the ones that are going to emerge as the winners are the ones that, again, have been able to integrate, built long-term relationships, and are able to leverage data, as a moat. Because, in this day and age, that data flywheel, which can help fine-tune models and allow you to be more targeted with, kind of value that you're offering, help people see around the corner. Those are going to be some of the winners. Now, folks that are a little more gimmicky, folks that are, one-trick ponies and haven't built that level of core retention with their customers, I think are going to really struggle. And I think just like with any major tech transformation, there's going to be winners and losers, and there's going to be some folks who don't move quickly enough. And speed's the name of the game, right? Like, we're now in a world, from an AI standpoint, to the second part of your question, where like what used to take years now takes weeks, right?
Sometimes days.
Hours, right? And so in my mind, those companies that, one, are able to leverage that trust that they've compounded, the data flywheel that they're able to build to create real moats and create proprietary, fine-tuned capabilities, models, et cetera, that really do add value for the end customer in ways that the customer can't generate themselves, are going to be real winners. And then when you think about the ability to move quickly and iterate fast and start planning in quarters or in months versus years, the companies that have built that core DNA or that flexibility and agility are going to be the ones that emerge
Mm.
and in many ways further differentiate themselves. And so I'm not as concerned or worried. I like to take more of an optimistic view on the power of tech. And people talk all the time about all the other examples of people catastrophizing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There is a real need and requirement though to be agile, to adapt, and to really leverage the core competencies and the core trust that you've built with your customers, if you're to really scale the value and the utility. Because if you don't do it, someone's at your neck, looking to do it
Yeah,
themselves.
it's super fierce right now. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about AI later, but I do want to jump into a little bit of your story of Cadre. So you built one of the first platforms that kind of democratized commercial real estate to folks. You've done billions of dollars of transactions. Recently sold the company
Mhm.
in 2023
Mhm.
to Yield Street. I'm curious, like, what was the transparency in the private markets that you were kind of like bringing to real estate? And why was that like an important thing to real estate in first place?
Great question. And when I think about the Cadre business and the experience, one of the things that we were able to do through technology, and you can call it Tech 2.0, as a stage and a phase, was create more information symmetry and parity. So allow, in our case, individuals who want to invest in real estate offerings to have the same levels and type of information as those who actually own the assets themselves. So you didn't have, crazy pricing mismatches and people not feeling like they were getting good deals and vice versa. And so in the scheme of what we were building at Cadre, this information symmetry was uniquely enabled through technology. And as a result, we were able to build a platform that scaled, that developed a level of trust with our core customers that they were excited about, and then willing to do more with us, right? Because the core product was let people buy fractional interests of real estate. And then we had other features, secondary market, so people could trade fractional stakes. We created a yield oriented products so
Mm,
people could kind of generate just more disposable income. You only get there though if again people have a level of trust. And how do I get trust? Get trust through transparency and knowing that they're not having a any kind of misrepresentations or anything that is asymmetric in nature. And when you sort of play that forward and you think about today, in this day and age from a tech standpoint, there's a lot of parallels with the ability of AI, and
mm.
especially those that are building companies where AI is truly core and native to the business, right? Not just layering on AI, like building intelligence at every part in the
Yep.
business, at every layer of the company is uh, is something that is going to be critical and necessary to really endure and to build trust, and um, having transparency on how that intelligence is being defined and developed and being propelled throughout the platform is going to be critical for people to adopt these platforms and systems. And the last thing I'll just say is I love the B2B space, and that's the sector and space where I feel like I've been able to really build an understanding of a sales cycle, especially in financial services and technology. And I always tell people that nothing compounds faster than trust,
Wow.
And so money doesn't compound faster. Um, even information doesn't compound fast. Trust ultimately is like the most important asset that you can build in financial services perspective. And for people who are looking to adopt new products, platforms that have an AI element and dimension to them, trusting the system, and trusting how the system's getting to certain outcomes and answers is absolutely critical. And that's where again transparency through technology becomes critical, and and clearly having humans in the loop to
Yeah.
be validators and verifiers is critical, but is very important. But the exciting thing for me is, and for the people that I'm now beginning to work on my next chapter with, is that the companies that can create parity between uh, product and service excellence vis-a-vis transparency, vis-a-vis openness, will be the real winners, especially in the B2B space where there's already some skepticism about, who's
What's
going to have
going
access to
on?
my data and the like. And so, I say all that
Security.
to say there's a lot of parallels between what we were able to do at Cadre with opening up an opaque asset class and space and creating trust so people were willing to invest digitally,
Yep.
which was like a foreign concept. And, the kinds of ideas that I have now where, you're leveraging intelligence, vis-a-vis AI to help people achieve and do things that they didn't think were possible either through technology, and to do it at scale, more profitably and more efficiently.
I want to jump in really quickly to trust. I know we're going to get to
Yeah,
AI. We're
yeah.
going to get to what you might be building sometime in the future, but trust is a big word at Harlem right now. Like we're saying, like trust comes before the transaction,
Mm,
and that's kind of like our mantra. It's like if we can meet you earlier before you fundraise or start a company, we believe that we can build trust better than others.
mm,
And trust is why you might choose to let Harlem Capital invest versus some other
yes.
investor. And so I'm curious about how do you build trust or also potentially legitimacy, especially in a category like real estate where
Mhm,
there are typical real estate families. They look a certain way, they go to certain schools, they
mhm.
are from certain regions. How did you build trust with the individuals and relationships? And then how did you build trust and like put that into a product?
Sure. From a trust perspective, the important thing that I've learned is how critical it is to um, be relationship oriented and focused and not transaction oriented and focused. Not have your hand out every time you're looking for something from someone who could potentially be helpful to you, but instead, um, you know, put your hand out to offer something. That could be insights into the market. It could be connections to people that large real estate family may not otherwise be connected to in the technology world. Um, and so relationship building, playing the long game is absolutely important and critical to establishing that level of trust. And sometimes that means foregoing opportunities if you're going to come off as transaction oriented and you're not really going to get to know the counterpart. And so for me, what I was focused on and what I've continued to focus on is how do I help you? How do I support you and whatever your goals may be? How do I open up, your horizons and the aperture of insights you have, based off my network or based off what I'm working on or based off, the trends and themes that I'm seeing in the space. And so, again, the relationship side of things is what I focus on a lot, very heavily. And, the beauty of building those relationships is, it's, effectively like kind of credits you're
Mm,
building with people, right? And um, as you continue to build those relationships and actually have opportunities for people, whether that's to invest or to partner, you go to them from a perspective in the place of, all right, I know you, you know me. We've had conversations in the past. I understand this might be an interesting opportunity for you, maybe something that fits, your investment box and thesis, and it's an organic dynamic and dialogue and conversation. And so I always took the long game, even if it meant, getting a lot of a lot of coffees and
yeah.
dinners and meetings with
Patience.
people. But it paid a lot of dividends when time came for me to speak with folks about partnering, investing. And then the other thing that I found is that you know when you're building trust, just like in any relationship, um, you do what you say, and you deliver, and you under promise and over deliver, and in all that you do. And so, yeah, if I were to have a meeting with someone and discuss um, connecting them to a certain person in, let's say, the AI space, for instance, and I never make that connection or follow up, you've just lost a lot of credibility and trust to your point. And so it's like simple things like that, is just following up, executing, going above and beyond, and then also doing things, offering support, insights, opportunities, um, just because you think it could be helpful and valuable for folks. And so the relationship side of things, playing the long game in terms of building truly enduring symbiotic relationships is one of the ways that I was focused on building trust, um, delivering and executing on what I said I was going to do for people, or what I said I was going to do vis-a-vis cadre, or just generally, and then thinking creatively about ways to give people reasons to smile, delight, and it sounds a little cheesy, but I've got so many examples of
But delight
times
is a
where,
big
yeah,
deal, it sounds like. I mean, I think, honestly, most people, I forgot there was another podcast I recently listened to where the investor said that jaw-dropping customer experience,
yeah,
and that's basically
yeah,
what delight is. I do wanna jump to one other piece on Cadre, and then
yeah.
we could talk more about AI, entrepreneurship, etcetera. So you raised well over 130 plus million for Cadre. And you had a pretty solid cap table. Like you literally had A16Z, you had Vinod Khosla from Khosla Ventures, you had Josh Kushner from Thrive. How do you think about choosing who is going to be a partner in your business? And then how do you navigate working with many of the top folks that are in the investor space?
So, one, I know how privileged I am and was to have those kinds of folks around the table, to invest and to believe in me and the idea and the team we were building. And I don't take that for granted. And I don't take it for granted because while it's nice to say you've raised hundreds of millions of dollars and you've been able to attract all this interesting and incredible expertise, the reality is that like 95% of my conversations with prospective investors were no thanks but no thanks, and so um, being able and willing to keep going, especially when you're getting no's, and especially when people are telling you, it's not for us, is absolutely essential, to being able to thrive. And what it's also done for me is again created a new level of gratitude for those that did believe in me. And so, to your question, I went into these conversations with Josh or Vinod or um, Jeff Jordan at Andreessen Horowitz or uh, Ken Chenault at General Catalyst. You name the investor with a level of gratitude for their time and for their willingness to not just put money into the business, but time and insights. Because I learned so much in that journey, and landed the plane, so to speak, for the business. But the learnings that I had from those folks were by far the most valuable currency. And so, um, I went in with gratitude, which was very helpful. There was no entitlement at all. And when I thought about who I wanted to work with, one was like, who wants to work with me? Because you're just trying to get capital,
Want to be in business.
right? Exactly. But I did have a framework, and I did have some principles. One was, you want to identify investors where there is investor founder fit, so to speak. You know what I mean? And so you want
Vibes in today's world.
right, exactly. That's perfect way. I didn't say it like that, but I'm a little old school and dumb. But you want to work with folks that are uh, either at a stage in their own evolution, their firm's evolution, that is going to ensure that they're committed and willing to be there with you through thick and thin, like the space you're in, love the domain that you're in almost as much as you do. And I always wanted to make sure that there was that level of, again, founder, um, investor fit, with examples. Ryan invested in X company. Good example is, with Josh Kushner. Obviously, Josh is a unique an incredible talent and leader and investor. And I knew him, personally before I knew him professionally. Um, but he had just incubated this company called Oscar, that now is a public company and is doing incredibly well. And just like any other company that had ups and downs, but Josh was able to point to Oscar as an example of what could be possible with Cadre, and I saw again the fit, from what he was able to apply there to what he and the team, the insights he could help apply to Cadre. So founder investor fit was one sort of vector. The second that I'm very focused on, and I'll be brief here, is not do I want to have a beer with this person, not do I want to go and spend an hour or two at the bar, talking, yakking it up, and having a fun conversations. But is this somebody who um, I am 100% confident I would be um, certain would be in the trenches with me,
When things go wrong,
when,
potentially.
when things go wrong, because they always go wrong. And is this someone who, when the whole world's against you and the markets are against you and there are unforeseen issues and challenges, and you literally feel like you're in that foxhole and you literally feel like, everybody's coming to attack you, you're having team issues, you're having macro issues. I mean, the pandemic's a whole, ball of wax that we can get
Yeah,
into. Um, can I call on this person to really be in the trenches with me to, help push back, fight,
yeah.
and ultimately prosper in the face of that adversity? And
Is there a
so,
time where maybe Josh or Ken Vano did that you are open to sharing with the audience?
yeah, I mean, there's so many instances across the board with many, many investors and advisors and partners. Um, looking at the pandemic, I guess it's probably the one experience that's very unique and unprecedented in our lifetimes, at least. But I think about the pandemic and our business, right? We were a platform focused on generating revenue from real estate transactions, and when real estate transactions froze, our business was paralyzed as well too for that time frame.
Zero.
Exactly. And so we only had recurring revenue, which fortunately did help keep the lights on for the business, but we weren't generating net new revenue for the business. um, and I can think of a number of people who I spoke with that gave me reassurance and confidence that this too shall pass. Vinod was one. Vinod actually called me up unsolicited, I remember, um, to check on me and just see how I was doing personally, because I had to do something I never want to do again and had to do, which was layoffs. We had to do a riff because nobody knew how long this was going to last. So you kind of had to forecast how long until
Yeah,
things go
we need to
back.
keep the doors open.
Right, exactly. And so just having a call like that, even from someone who I know has got thousands of things going on, to check on you personally was critical. And his partner Samir Call, who is a senior partner at Khosla as well, he did the same thing. And he also did something that I really appreciated, which was mobilized and rallied our core investors. So Josh Kushner, Samir Kinchinal, and Joel Cutler, General Catalyst, um, to basically invest in the business and provide us with basically a bridge to see through this turbulence and volatility. And so they didn't have to do that. They had 50 other companies that needed the money, probably more than we did. But they were there. They believed in what we were doing and what we were building, the mission and the value that we had delivered. And keep in mind, a lot of them were also investors in the real estate offerings on our platform, so they saw what we were promising, and that investment literally meant the world to me and us. And so I actually think the first person to propose and to step up was Josh, when everybody else was, again, focusing on, companies that were really bleeding and really struggling and weren't going to survive and make it through. But he rallied the rest of those core board members and core partners, and it made all the difference to me. And it gave me some good news for the team because
Right.
culturally we were struggling
A
as
lot of
well.
bad news.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll just say, because actually I think it's funny, the last time I was in this room, I was actually in this room There's been a couple times in instances, but one of the times was with a guy named Mike Fascitelli. So Mike was a former CEO of Vornado, head of Goldman's real estate group. Mike is a legend and board member, mentor. He's been with me through thick and thin. And and Mike was an ambassador and conduit, between me, the board, and key investors. People looked at him from a credibility perspective because he has a lot more wisdom and experience than me.
A lot more gray hair
I didn't
potentially.
say it, you said it. And so having somebody like that who genuinely cares about you and your well-being, because people don't talk enough about mental health for founders. But like, I was getting bombarded from every angle, and Ben Horowitz talks about it. And, the hard thing about hard things is that wartime, like this is wartime on another level, on every front possible. We were fighting wars from the north, east, south, west, and so having somebody like Mike give you that leverage and be that conduit and say, hey, like, let's, step up, support Ryan and the team. I'm actually there, I'm in meetings virtually. Were some instances that I'll never forget.
That's awesome. We're in a transition now that we talked about Cadre, how you started a business, also how you finished the business and landed the plane. Congrats again to that. Let's talk a little bit about how you might start something new, right? Like you started 12 years ago. I was looking it up.
Mhm,
12 years ago, you started Cadre, very pre AI.
mhm,
Now, today, we were talking about this off camera. You can get things done not just in weeks or days, you can get stuff done in hours.
mhm.
And so I'm curious with you, like if starting a company in the new AI age, like how do you approach that from a team standpoint, from a product standpoint, maybe even from a leadership standpoint?
So we're now in uh, we're in a new age for sure. We're playing a completely different sport. Like this is a whole new, literally, figuratively, ball game. And that requires different skill sets and experiences and levels and areas of focus and awareness. In order to succeed and to thrive. And so, where do you need to be focused and aware, or at least where are we focused and aware when we're building our business and growing in this new age and this new ecosystem? Speed and velocity. The cycles of innovation are happening so rapidly that it's kind of unfathomable, in a lot of ways. What was a dream and vision 6 months ago is now table stakes in so many ways, right? And so you have to build a team and a culture that is willing to move with extreme velocity and speed, um, but not be reckless, especially in the B2B space where you're looking to build trust and um, something I pride myself on and our team on is um, exceptional levels of trust and empathy for our customers and clients and the like. And so speed and velocity is table stakes now. It's not even like, this is one of our advantages, our core principles is we move fast and we, are running at 1,000 miles an hour. No, like that's table stakes now. And that's because the pace of innovation is just rapid. And so that's one big change. What used to take me, years to build, to develop, to scale, again, you can now do in days, in many cases, sometimes even faster. And so there has to be a recognition and awareness about that. The second principle that has guided how building our product and our team is this emphasis on human capital and the quality and caliber of people. Cadre always prided ourselves on, having the absolute best talent, in our space, in our sector, both from a real estate and a technology standpoint. we prided ourselves on hiring, and said this in an interview in an article, and it got posted all over the place. And people are like, "What do you mean by that?" And I'd have interviews with people, and they'd start quoting me on this. And I'm like, I should never said that. But I said, when you're building a business and a team, you should be hiring people you have no business hiring. And so, some people use that against me when I was interviewing them. They said, "Didn't you say that you should hire people you have no business hiring?" I fit that mold. I was like, "Oh, shoot, you got me." But now that's especially true. It's like, find just incredible talent, and talent that is excited about the mission, that's going to go above and beyond. Because, in this world where, there's fewer and fewer moats, I firmly believe one of the biggest moats, greatest moats, most enduring moats is human capital, talent, people, especially in a business that's B2B services oriented. And you're seeing it in like this arms race from a talent perspective, right? With people getting crazy contracts to, go work at,
OpenAI,
yeah,
super intelligence team at
exactly.
Meta, etc.
Exactly. So I'd say human capital talent, there's an even bigger premium in this day and age. And then the final thing I would say is there has to be an extreme willingness to absorb uncertainty and still move forward, progress, and persevere despite the uncertainty. When you're building a startup in a company, there's always uncertainty. There's always unknowns and craziness happening, and yeah, you've got to be able to still navigate and manage that. In this day and age, it's like that 10x. So finding team members that are willing to do so is critical as well. And I'll just end by saying that operating in a lean fashion, right, where you can do a lot more with less, it's a real dynamic for sure. And you can maintain the quality of what you're doing by having that incredible base of talent and people, especially in spaces that historically are not known for having the best technical minds in the world, which is where I like to build businesses, is in those niches that aren't sexy,
Yep.
that are the last frontiers.
That's one of our themes. We have it as leapfrogging legacy industries. That's like
Yes.
one of our themes internally. I wanted to say one other quote that like made sense here. I think you wrote this in a recent LinkedIn. You said the impossible becomes possible when you surround yourself with people who believe in the mission as much as you do. And it
Mhm.
sounds like even with a more lean team, if you have exceptional people around you, you can kind of like overcome these potentially impossible
Yes.
problems.
Yes.
Maybe a question we can kind of like end on
Mhm.
is we have a slogan internally at Harlem Capital that where we say push past possible. It talks about like grit and
Mm.
growth
Yeah.
mindset,
Yeah, I love that.
finding a way to win. You have a mantra where you say to achieve unconventional outcomes, you've got to do unconventional things.
Yes.
So I'm curious, like if there's a founder watching right now, if you had to give them an advice, what would you tell them around solving unconventional solving for unconventional outcomes? And how do they do that as they like try to build their first company or their next company?
Yes. So that's definitely one of the mantras that I remind myself of, 'cause I need the reminders as well sometimes, because it's easy to follow the herd and the pack, and especially when you see uh, what people are putting out there, on the web and on social media, etc. Um, but I've always been willing, and I think it's just important to stay true to who you are. But I've always been willing to swim against the tide, and it starts with my background and my upbringing. Coming from Louisiana, um, I do not fit the archetype, of what a founder and repeat founder in these spaces that we're in. Um, Oftentimes, people think about, right, when they're thinking about success. But if I trace just my journey, I've had a lot of good fortune, being in the right place at the right time. But I've also been willing to make bets and take leaps, um, in uh, very, very, unique ways, and ways that other people would say is crazy. And uh, I think about leaving Blackstone, for instance, right? Where I was, making more cash than, I even thought was possible, and I was able to provide for my, family and extended family, and it was a sure shot way to make a ton of money and capital, and um, but I saw an opportunity to spread that wealth, so to speak, literally and
Yeah.
figuratively, and
Democratize it.
democratize it. And I wanted to stay true to um, who I was, and I want to stay true to the principles, the values that my family, my parents instilled in me, to whom much is given, much is required. Because you only get one shot at life. You get a few at bats, to build businesses, or to do things that are really crazy and innovative. Uh, and I reminded myself of, like, look, Ryan, you now have built a level of credentials that should allow you to go out and raise capital and build from a position of strength. You've identified an opportunity that others aren't attacking in a way that you think makes sense. And if not you, who? And so um, I say all that to say, if I were giving advice, and I like to more experience share than give advice, because everybody's got their own dynamics that they have to deal with and that they've got going on. But if I were sharing experience and a little bit of guidance, what I would say is, um, if you're thinking about building a business, there's never a right time to do it. There's just not. There's never perfect alignment, everything, set up in a way that is gonna make this a sure shot. There never is. Most companies are gonna fail. The vast majority are going to fail. Um, but getting in the game and learning and being a part of that journey and that experience of standing something up, you build resilience muscle. You build a level of confidence, trust, and you grow. And growth and comfort, I've always said, they can't coexist, And so that's what life to me is really about, is growing, is evolving, is being, a better version of yourself and having a greater, wider impact. And I think the best way to do that personally is is to go out and build. And I actually think that with the advent of AI, we're going to see a whole new wave of people who maybe didn't think they were entrepreneurial, having the time now and the ability to go out and build. And so, you know, why not go and start refining that muscle, so that when time comes and you've got a little bit more flexibility, you've already built the confidence, and you've already built the understanding of how to go about attracting talent and building a mission, and guiding folks towards that mission. And so, uh, again, taking the jump, getting in the game, the best way to get experience and reps and be in a position where, um, if business act one doesn't work, and act one for me definitely didn't work, and neither did act two, for that matter, way back in the day. But I learned so much about what you need to do and what it does take to have success, that it really it decreased, the likelihood of failure
Mm.
in subsequent businesses. And if you think about, like, for most companies, whatever the numbers are, I don't know, 5-10% are actually going to get to a point where there's a return on capital, and it's probably smaller than that even. Um, I think that, again, you can increase that number and threshold exponentially if you've already gone through
Yeah.
by building a business and starting and getting in the game. And so, if you have an idea, if you see a niche or a green shoot, if you've got a unique insight because of where you're working, do the unconventional thing. Go out, leave. You don't need to be a college dropout, to go and build an enduring company. You don't even need to, have to build a traditional operating business. You go out and build a unique organization as an investor, like you did and you all did. That's a incredible business model, and I just think there's going to be so much more diversity in what you can go about building and creating and doing, that you know it's uh it's one of the greatest opportunities and
Mm.
windows now to get that experience. So it's my advice would be, jump into
Go
the
do
deep
it.
end, man, or woman. Jump in the deep end, do it, uh and you will learn, even if you needed help from the lifeguard,
Yeah.
how to swim.
I love that. Learn on the job. I think especially on a go forward basis. Like most people will learn by doing.
Mm,
And because of the tools, the technology, the education,
yeah.
and even like it becomes lower stakes.
Yes.
We can now start like literally learning by doing instead of potentially always having to go to school or doing this and do that. We just learn by doing.
Yes.
Well, awesome. Ryan, we appreciate you coming
Thank
on
you,
to the
man.
podcast.
Thank
We'll
you
have
so
to have
much.
you on in the
Yes.
future to talk
Yes.
more
We got
about the new
a
company.
lot in the hopper, and I'm incredibly excited. I will just end by saying I'm super grateful for Harlem Capital support, your backing, and the ethos that you all have, and the principles and values, especially around trust and being founder first and founder centric. A lot of people talk about it, very few people walk it, and you all do. It's one of the reasons why, again, I'm so excited to come back when we can
Let's
share
go.
more and
I'm pumped.
build the relationship and the partnership. But you all are inspirational, and um, kudos to everything you guys are doing too.
Ryan, appreciate that. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.